The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has been out for a few months now. That's given me enough time to finally beat the main storyline, explore most of this vast open world, and I finally feel like I can share my honest opinions on the game. Since uploading my video on Breath of the Wild and upsetting about 50% of the Zelda fan community, I have had a ton of people asking how I felt about Tears of the Kingdom. Now, as someone who's been a huge Legend of Zelda fan for over 20 years, the opinions I shared on Breath of the Wild weren't shared to intentionally anger anyone. Rather, they're how I honestly feel about the game. Breath of the Wild is a good game that lacks a lot of the core Zelda staples, but it does introduce many fresh new innovations that I really enjoyed. Luckily for us old school Zelda fans, Tears of the Kingdom did exactly what I hoped it would by taking the Breath of the Wild formula and reintroducing some of those core Zelda mechanics. Firstly, I have to mention that Tears of the Kingdom is not just Breath of the Wild 2. I've read a lot of complaints about how the recycling of assets used in Breath of the Wild is just the developers being lazy, but I don't share that opinion. Majora's Mask used the same game engine and textures as Ocarina of Time, but produced a completely different and unique result. There's an old saying that goes, if it's not broken, don't fix it, and the issues I had with Breath of the Wild weren't pertaining to the engine itself. On top of this, though Hyrule looks similar on the surface, if you explore it you'll find the worlds are quite different, and the games take place 7 years apart. Pretty much every area that you visited in Breath of the Wild looks vastly different in Tears of the Kingdom. There's also the obvious introduction of both the Sky Islands and the Depths, which resulted in the world being more than double the size of Breath of the Wild's. Though I found a lot of the Sky Islands to be a bit repetitive, it was exploring the depths that always felt both exciting and terrifying. As a fan of the more darker themed Zelda games, the addition of this area was quite satisfying. So the truth is, these games feel quite different from each other, even though they may look similar at times. And unless you have a problem with specifically the game engine or the art direction of Breath of the Wild, you'll likely love experiencing Tears of the Kingdom. Being a longtime Legend of Zelda fan, what disappointed me the most about Breath of the Wild was the dungeons and their respective bosses. The 4 main dungeons in the game looked almost exactly the same, both in bland color and design, and the bosses were essentially carbon copies of each other. I am super glad to say that Tears of the Kingdom completely resolved this complaint. Though I wouldn't quite put them on par with some of the legendary dungeons in Ocarina of Time, Tears of the Kingdom has some of the best dungeons I've played in a long time. The puzzle design is excellent, and with the new building mechanics and incredible physics in the game, pretty much every puzzle has multiple solutions, leading to the game feeling really free and inspiring you to be creative. On top of this, the main bosses provided excellent new challenges that require you to use new abilities acquired by the sages, resulting in each of those bosses feeling unique. The wonderful boss design carries out into the wild, where you can find new bosses where you least expected it. As I previously mentioned, the new building mechanic is unbelievably fun to play around with. It took me so long to finish the game because numerous times I would find myself turning on my Switch with the intention of progressing in the main story, only to spend a whole play session building some dumb invention or weapon and laughing at the results. The physics system was already good in Breath of the Wild, but how Nintendo managed to create Tears of the Kingdom really fathoms me. This truly is the most free game I have ever played, not only in the storyline and the order in which you choose to complete it, but in every single aspect of the game. You can play the game exactly how you want to, and it can be a completely different way than someone else plays it. From the cooking of meals, to the solution of puzzles, to even how you go about taking on tough enemies, Tears of the Kingdom is truly a freeing experience. But don't just take my word for it. Allow me to introduce a wonderful guest to the channel. When it comes to Zelda games, her opinion is one that I really value and consider, as she's probably the biggest fan of the series that I know. Please welcome my friend Lily Hyrule.
Hello everyone, happy to be here and thank you very much Adam for that amazing introduction. Okay, now then, Tears of the Kingdom. Ever since we knew a Breath of the Wild sequel was in development, both new and experienced players were hoping for a better storyline. The Legend of Zelda has always been recognized for a more linear storyline, even though the original idea has always been an open world concept that gives the player the freedom to choose their own path and promotes exploration. But let's just say that a lot of us are used to a more classic Zelda formula, and even though Breath of the Wild achieved the full potential of of exploration, the storyline was kind of everywhere. In order to understand the whole story, it was necessary to look for the memories that were scattered all across Hyrule by only using a photo recorded on your Sheikah slate as a reference, making the experience quite exhausting. In Tears of the Kingdom, we have a similar approach, but much more improved with Dragon Tears. You start with our beloved Impa, where she explains she's investigating the geoglyphs that appear after the upheaval, and your quest is to find them all and look for the hidden tears of the dragon. But not to worry, they are very easy to find. I mean, look at them, they even glow, so you should be good. Each tier contains a memory of Hyrule's distant past that tells us the story of Princess Zelda, King Rauru, and Queen Sonia, making the storyline much clearer and easier to follow compared to Breath of the Wild. Oh, and on a side note, I know it's very easy to let excitement drive us and simply avoid following what Impa is telling us, but don't forget to visit the Forgotten Temple. There, not only you'll find the location of each tier, but the actual order that you should look for them. Of course, you can always do it your own way, but it really helps a lot to follow along the story. A few friends of mine didn't like the fact that they are not in order, when in fact they are. All they have to do is to know where to look. And now that we're talking about the main story, there is an order to complete each of the regional phenomena if you follow the adventure log step by step. However, Nintendo kept the player's freedom in mind, therefore every time you awaken one of the sages, you get the same cutscene, but the only difference is who is telling the story. This means that you won't be confused if you decide to go and visit Gerudo in the first place instead of the Ritos. I personally miss the fact that on each dungeon or temple, you need a certain weapon or item to help you go through it. But if you think about it, this will prevent players from being able to make their own decisions in the game. And something very unique in Tears of the Kingdom is that you can complete a certain quest without even talking to the NPC in the first place. Their dialogue actually changes, acknowledging what you just said. For example, if you find the auto-build ability in the abandoned central mine without first getting the quest from Joshua, you can still do it and talk to her afterwards, and you'll notice her dialogue will change once she realizes that you already found it. That's a win. Puzzles are no stranger for the Legend of Zelda franchise, whether you're going to try to solve a classic Zelda dungeon or temple, or something a bit smaller like the shrines. You always have the challenge of figuring out and occasionally finding yourself on a dead end, even ending up Googling the solution. Well, thanks to the crazy mechanics and physics in Tears of the Kingdom, you don't have to worry about it. There's absolutely no wrong way to solve any of them, giving you multiple ways to solve every problem. And this is not even limited to puzzles. Oh no, Nintendo wanted you to think outside the box and come up with creative ways to fight bosses, to reach the highest sky island, to build impressive vehicles, even Gundams if you feel like it. I'm sure you have seen a lot of those insane amount of videos from Zelda players from all over the world, building stuff and even making music. There is absolutely no limit on this game that inspires pure creativity that will guarantee you hours and hours of gameplay. And this is exactly why I'm not sure if I'll be playing Breath of the Wild anymore, except for the champion's abilities. I have to say that they were better thought than the sages. Don't get me wrong, I love them, but they tend to get in the way. And sure, you can dismiss them, but you still have to go back and forth in the menu to dismiss and summon them again. Because you have to admit that Tulin's bow and gust is much more needed from time to time, unless he accidentally blows away a very important loot you just recently got from a fight. But hey, his critical shots with his bow are totally worth it. Anyway, I'll say that's my only complaint and some other things that I would love to discuss a bit more in depth. I could literally go on for hours and hours, but I'll save that for another time. Now it's time for Adam to wrap this up. So back to you, Adam. Pleasure being here.
Thanks for that great analysis, Lily. I agree, and we could talk about this game for hours. There's just so much great content that I feel like you can play this game for hundreds of hours and still feel like there's more to do. My personal only real complaints about this game are the lack of complete voice acting and some of the frame drops during intense boss battles. But really both of those things have more to do with the hardware than the game itself, and will likely be fixed with whatever iteration of the Nintendo Switch we get next. And with that being said, the pros of this game heavily outweigh any cons. Though not perfect, Tears of the Kingdom will likely end up being a console-defining game that is talked about for many years to come. From its amazing physics-based engine that allows for unmatched creativity, to a somewhat return to form with the unique dungeons and captivating story, Tears of the Kingdom is a far stronger Zelda game than Breath of the Wild was, and I would consider it an absolute must-play if you're a Legend of Zelda fan. Now I just want to take a moment here to give a huge shout out and thank you to Lily for collaborating on this video. If you enjoyed the video, please go subscribe to her channel. All of her main social handles will be in the description down below. I also want to thank everyone who watched this video all the way up until the end. I'm super happy and grateful for the growth of this channel over the past year, and can't wait to share more content with you all in the future. Until the next one, take care everyone.